Thank you, Mary. I'm very honored to be invited. I'm also a proud New England province Jesuit. I did my training at our novitiate in Jamaica Plain and also studied at the former Weston Jesuit School of Theology, so I feel right at home. And this is our former novitiate, so I know a lot of guys that went through the program here. So I came in prepared to talk about either one of two things. Gave Mary a choice, and you know, I asked Mary, you know, what would be the most useful thing for the group, and we decided that I'd talk about a particular form of prayer, and to try to help lead you through a little bit of a kind of a meditation today. So the other topic was, you know, where to buy my books. Very beautiful topic. It is true that when I wrote the book, The Jesuit Guide to Almost Everything, I was really thinking of this group, you know, committed lay people, people who maybe know a little bit about Jesuit spirituality, a lot about Jesuit spirituality, but not Jesuits, right? Not Jesuits, for a professional, educated, articulate group of people that wanted to know more about the riches of the Ignatian tradition. So there's a little plug for my book. St. Ignatius Loyola, as you know, was a very practical guy. He was a very practical mystic. By the way, I'll talk for about a half an hour, and then we'll do a little guided meditation, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. And you know, he wanted to help people notice where God was in their lives, where God was already active. And one of the ways that he did this was through, this, as you know, the spiritual exercises. Everybody in this, raise your hands if you've heard of the spiritual exercises. Okay, good. You all know about the tradition of the spiritual exercises and the spirituality of finding God in all things and becoming a contemplative in action, or even a contemplative leader in action. But I wanted to talk about the examination of conscience today. And as Mary was saying, I'm teaching. First time I'm teaching. I'm the only Jesuit you'll meet that's never taught. I did my regency, which is the time after philosophy and before theology, working with the Jesuit Refugee Corps. I'm getting like the name the Jesuit Refugee Service in East Africa, and then I worked for a year at America Magazine, and I've been working at America Magazine since 1999, since my ordination. So I've never taught, ever. So they invited me to teach at BC, the Summer Institute. And I was meeting with a guy named Tom Groom, who is a professor at BC, and he has this great Irish brogue, and he said, well, we're very excited about tonight in your first class, and it's a week, 5 days, 3 hours a night, right? Introduction to Ignatian spirituality. And I said, you know, Tom, I said, this is the first time I've ever taught anywhere. He goes, oh, you might have told us that before. I said, you invited me. And one of the things we talked about last night, which I think is always helpful for people, is the examination of conscience. Raise your hands if you've heard of the examination of conscience, or the examen. Raise your hands if you, actually close your eyes. Close your eyes when you do this. I don't want people to see each other. Raise your hands because people feel embarrassed. Raise your hands if you do the examination of conscience regularly. That means every night. Okay, raise your hands if you think you do it well every night. Okay, you can open your eyes. One person said that. Okay, one person said that four said they do it every night, one said they do it well every night. Okay? Why is that? That is because Catholics think, well, why aren't people doing it? It's probably because you're busy, right? Everyone wants to find God in their daily lives. So for those of you that didn't raise your hands, you're busy, right? I understand that. And it's great that you can make time for today. Why don't people think they pray well? No one thinks they pray well. That's the dirty little secret of spiritual life. Everyone thinks someone else or everyone else closes their eyes at night and has this sort of mystical contemplation, and has visions, and is filled with delights and spiritual fruits, and mine is really boring. Well, I'm here to tell you that everyone struggles with prayer, right? Everyone struggles with finding time for prayer. Everyone struggles with prayer. So I'm going to talk to you about the examination as a useful tool for helping you find God in your daily life. Okay, now, what is the examination of conscience? It's essentially a review of the day. All right? Ignatius wanted us, it was the one thing that Ignatius said to the Jesuits, it's a prayer that you should never miss in addition to the Mass. The one prayer he said you never miss during the day. He doesn't say it's Ignatian contemplation, you know, where you put yourself in the scene. He doesn't say it's Lectio Divina, where you read the scripture passages quietly. He doesn't say it's centering prayer. He said a Jesuit should never miss the examination of conscience. That's how strongly it was for him, and that's how much it figured into his spirituality. So, it's a review of the day. Why do we need to do it? Well, because we tend to overlook things. It's human nature to forget things, right? Something that happened yesterday, you will forget, right? He begins it with, I'll talk about, he also wants us to be aware. Not simply aware of where God was, but aware of where God is. And frequently, it's easier to see God in retrospect, right? A sort of more extreme version of this is if you've gone through a very difficult time in your life, and then years later you can say, you know what, now I can see where God was, you know? It's like that story of God appearing to Moses. God says, you can't see my face, but you will see me pass, right? It's sometimes easier to see where God has passed. It's easier to look back and identify where God was. So it's about noticing, and you're doing it day by day. It's also about patterns, noticing where God is active in patterns in your life, you know, maybe in relationships or in your work. You know, if you start to say to yourself every night, you know what, I am really so grateful for my job, and I've never really recognized this, you know, and that happens night after night after night. It creates in you, when you're at work, a sense of gratitude. You're more aware of it because you've actually kind of looked at it and analyzed it. And of course, it moves you to change. The examination of conscience moves you to conversion and change. It's not simply about noticing and saying, oh, that's nice, you know, and then going back to your day. It's noticing. It's becoming more grateful. It's inviting you to conversion. Okay, so what is it? Okay, well, there's many ways of doing it. My way, which is the best way, and the only way, is 5 steps. It's very simple. Now, for those of you that didn't raise your hands, and, you know, we're all busy. All of us in this room are busy. This is 10 minutes. It's 10 minutes. It's usually at the end of the day. Sometimes people find that they're tired, you know, so they have a hard time. So sometimes they'll do it early in the day, you know, right when they get up about the day before. Or you can do it at lunch. You can do it from sort of like noon to noon. But that's all you need, 10 minutes. So the first step is this. You place yourself in the presence of God. Okay? Now, why do you do that? Because frequently when we're praying, we think of it as kind of like a monologue, right? And if you're going to review the day, you know, it becomes just a list of things. I did this, then I did this, then I did this, then I did this. That was nice. I'm grateful. That's nice. The end. Okay, time for bed. You know, it's just on your own. It's very kind of solipsistic. And so, placing yourself in the presence of God and asking God to be with you is a reminder that there is another actor in this prayer, and it is God. Right? You are not praying alone. Right? God is helping you with your prayer. I think a lot of us feel like this when we pray. You know, it's not about producing things, right? Which is very antithetical to our Western culture, isn't it? It's not about doing things or getting things done or producing or having effects, something like that. It's about being in relationship with God, okay? So we place ourselves in the presence of God. Then we begin with gratitude, okay? Ignatius asks us to start with gratitude. Why do we do that? Because if I said to you, I would like you to think about your day yesterday, you would probably go to the problems. Oh my gosh, I had the worst day, you know. At work, you know, my boss, you go right to the problems. Why do we do that? Because we're hardwired to do that. Now, a couple days ago I was standing on the subway platform in New York, and I always think that's very interesting in terms of like how we're sort of built physiologically. And I was here, and out of the corner of my eye, I mean, I'm not like, I don't have like special bat vision or anything, I saw something move. And I went over, and it was a rat. Right? It was well, you know, I mean, it's New York. I'm sure they have them on the T, too. And it was a rat, and I thought, isn't that interesting? Like, without even sort of trying, my body, my eye picks that up. Well, where does that come from? That comes from our kind of caveman, cavewoman senses, right? We're alert. I mean, I was reading an article that said that, you know, to be able to distinguish something in the bush, you know, could mean the difference between life and death, right? So if you think about natural selection, the people who are the most attentive are the ones that are going to be surviving, right? So we have the tendency, normally, to be very attentive, right? And that works in terms of, you know, if you're a caveman, right, or a cavewoman, that's great. It doesn't work so well in the spiritual life to sort of focus on the problems or go to here, right? Now, the most contemplative cave person would probably be eaten by the saber-toothed tiger, right? Like, oh, you know, I'm just enjoying the... so you think about it, we're bred to be problem solvers and looking for problems. And we're also very... all the people in this room are very accomplished people. We're problem solvers. I think that's a good thing to be, right? To look for something that needs fixing. The problem is when you start your examen like that, you miss the gratitude. So St. Ignatius says, begin the examination of conscience with gratitude. Consciously calling to mind things that you're grateful for and savoring them. Very simple things. It doesn't have to be, you know, it could be big things, you know, like I got a raise or I got a promotion or something went really well at work or I'm engaged, or, you know, I discovered Clea, you know, we came up with a new name, I'm so happy. It could also be small things. You know, it's beautiful outside. You know, I got a call from a friend I haven't heard from. I laughed a lot at lunch. You know. Yesterday at BC, we did the examination, and in the class, as we'll soon do, and a woman said, I thought it was so sweet, I was telling Mary beforehand, a woman said, I was leaving for class, and my little daughter, who's 4, came up and she was eating Cheetos, and there was yellow, you know, the Cheetos all over her mouth, and she kissed me through the screen door. Isn't that a beautiful image? And I remembered that, and as I was doing the exam, I could smell the screen door, the Cheetos, you know, her shampoo. You would miss that. You know, if you went right to, oh, you know, my boss has this problem with me, you know. So Ignatius wants us to ground ourselves in gratitude and just savor things. And it could be anything. I did a video for Loyola Press a few years ago called Finding God in All Things. I helped them with, I helped them, but there were other Jesuits as well, John O'Malley and Greg Boyle and all these other people. And they asked me to talk about the examination of conscience. And so we filmed it a couple times, you know, they did a couple takes. And as an example, I had just had lunch and I had a really nice orange, and I said, you know, it doesn't have to be a big thing, it could be a raise, but could it be the taste of an orange at lunch, you know, that you had? And they said, well, do it again, so I did a different camera angle. It could be the taste of an orange and this, blah, 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 and then do it, you know, we're going to do it like far away and stuff. And when they cut it, you know, they had different parts of Ignatian spirituality, and they kept coming back to me for gratitude, and I kept saying, like an orange, you have an orange. So this friend of mine did it in his class with his students, and he showed the tape, and he called me up, he's like, what's with you and oranges? So gratitude. Then you recall the day. You review the day from start to finish. What did you do? Where did you experience God? Where did you feel God's presence? You know, from start to finish, it's like, you know, sort of rewinding a tape. It's kind of old-fashioned now, but rewinding your DVR and looking through your day. As one Jesuit said, rummaging through your day and seeing where God was, you know, and just noticing where God was. Then the fourth step is sorrow. You know, unless you're, I don't see the Blessed Mother of Jesus in this room unless they're very well hidden. I mean, well, actually they're there on the painting. But you probably are a sinful person, right? And there's probably something that you regret. It might be a grave sin, you know. It might be something kind of selfless or selfish that you did, someone you didn't sort of extend courtesy to. You bring it up and you ask God for forgiveness. You know? And you may also decide that you want to avail yourself of the sacrament of reconciliation in the future. And then finally, you end with grace. You ask God for the grace for the next day. It's moving ahead, essentially. Now, the examen is really meant to help us see where God was. And I'll give you a very quick story and then we'll try it out. And then we'll have some time for Q&A. I was, part of my Jesuit training, I did my novitiate in JP. I went to Jesuit, my philosophy studies at Loyola Chicago. And part of our stuff, our time at Loyola Chicago, was working in ministries, outside ministries. It wasn't just philosophy. And the first year, we got our pick of ministries. I worked with a guy who worked with street gangs in the inner city of Chicago. It's this guy named Brother Bill, this kind of latter-day, modern-day St. Francis of Assisi. And he would work with gang members. He would stand in the middle of warring gang factions, and he would stop them from fighting just by his presence. It was amazing. And I thought, I definitely want to do that. That is so cool. You know, which is probably the wrong way to discern, but I thought, you know, we got to wear cassocks, you know, it's like so cool. And I did this really cool work. I worked with the street gangs. We, in fact, stood in the midst of them when they were fighting. You could see bottles flying over their heads and our heads. And the idea was, by the way, we gave them an excuse to stop. Like, we don't want to harm, you know, Brother Bill and, as they call us, the Black Robes. And you know, it was a lot of one-on-one work with the guys. It was really interesting. I mean, it was very like gritty, and he was written up in the paper. I thought it was so cool. And actually, there was a hole in the cassock that the Jesuit Scholastics used, who worked with Brother Bill. And one of the Jesuit Scholastics said to me, "Oh yeah, you know what? That's a bullet hole from where one of the guys was like shot." I was like, "Oh, that is so cool." And I went to my Jesuit superior and I go, "Look, this is like," he goes, "That's a cigarette burn." So the next year, however, I worked with, I couldn't do the same thing each year. I worked with at a community center, and I was helping poor and homeless people find jobs. And I worked for GE, as you heard, for 6 years in corporate finance and HR. And so I had some talent in terms of helping people with their resumes. And so I would work with people, help them do practice interviews, write resumes, go through the want ads. This is pre-Craigslist, way pre-Craigslist, pre-internet. And, you know, people would come to me and it just seemed kind of dull. It's kind of boring. And there was one woman who came, I'll call her Wanda. She was out of work, she was homeless. She came every week to see me. And we would go over her resume, and we would, you know, do practice interviews, and she didn't have a home, so we couldn't put an address on it. And so this is where I was at the time. It was very frustrating for me. I just thought, this is, you know, oh my gosh, this is just like banging my head against the wall. And, you know, I wanted to help her, but the job seemed boring. So one day I was with my spiritual director, and you know, he said, "What's going on in your spiritual life?" I said, "Well, I had this prayer experience and community and my studies and blah blah blah, and this blah blah blah." And at the end he says, "You know, I notice you're not really talking about your ministry very much. You used to always talk about your gang ministry with Brother Bill." And I said, "Well, that's because it's boring." And he goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "It's just, you know, I'm going to just sit at a table and I help these people, and it's not really exciting." And he says, "Maybe it's boring because you're not praying about it." And I said, "No, it's boring because it's boring." And he said, "Well, I want you the next time that you go to the community center, I want you to, that night, think about the work." So anyway, like a day or two later, we would go like 3 days a week, and I went to the Howard Area Community Center. And so that night I went through did my examen. Jesuits never miss the examen. You know, okay, we've got presents, gratitude, oh, I had a nice orange. Day, blah, 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 I did this, that was nice, oh, thank you, blah, 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 sorrow, oh, I shouldn't have done that, grace, okay, oh, and I thought, oh, I forgot, I know I have to pray about my ministry. So I called Wanda's face to mind, and I started crying. I couldn't believe it. I was like, now, as I described her before, she sounds like just a pain in the neck. But this is this woman who is coming to me, homeless and poor and desperate and longing, you know, and failing in a sense to get. And I started to cry, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, I you know, sort of uncovered this well of kind of pity for her. So the next day, I said to my director, "I have to see you." Like emergency spiritual director, you know? And I remember he was like, "Well, how about 2:30? I was like, "How about 1? You know, how about right after lunch?" Because, you know, you want to skip lunch. So he saw me. He goes, you know, like a good director, you know, what's going on? And I said, "I had the strangest experience last night." And I described it, and he says, "What? Why does that surprise you?" I said, "Well, I don't know, it just seems so like, what is that?" And he goes, "You're feeling God's compassion for Wanda. How else is God going to work through you? I mean, that's what ministry is, you know." And the point is, the next time I saw Wanda, it was like being with someone holy, which of course she was, you know, and I was very aware of who she was, how God was with us. It was really beautiful. It really changed the way I look at the examen and ministry. You know, it was a real shift for me. The point is this, not that I'm any great mystic or anything, but it was the examination of conscience that did that. Because left to my own devices, I would have just, we all do this, so skated over the surface of stuff and not really gone deeper. So what I'd like to do is, since you're all done eating, I'd like to do the examination with you. This is the Contemplative Leaders in action, at least for now. And so let's be contemplative a little bit. So it's not going to take too long, don't worry. It's very simple. And if you've done it, maybe this will be a different way of doing it. And if you haven't done it, maybe it'll be a good thing to try out. So